everybody. Thanks for joining us live. I'm liking that intro music is changing, so it's always a bit of a surprise. I'll have to use our podcast intro in the future. Thanks for joining us on another live Q&A. So excited to be here in a very rainy Toronto day. So do let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat. Matty, where are you located? I forgot to ask you.
I am outside Philadelphia.
Oh, and
it's
is it
actually
raining there too?
Quite nice today.
Oh, jealous of that. We had one day of sunshine yesterday and it's just been sort of dull and rainy now. So
yeah, it's that time of year for sure.
Oh, well, yes. Let us know where you're tuning into from in the chat. And then also, if you have any questions throughout, you can drop them in the chat and we'll pop them up and try and get to them as much as possible. And so I want to welcome Matty. I'm going to read your intro if that's okay with you. So happy to have Matty Dalrymple here. You're the author of the Lizzie Ballard thrillers and the Anne Kinnear suspense novels and suspense shorts. She is a member of the International Thriller Writers and Sisters in Crime. Matty also podcasts, writes, speaks, and consults on the craft and publishing voyage as the indie author, which is your podcast. And her articles have appeared in Writer's Digest magazine, and she serves as the campaigns manager for the Alliance of Independent Authors. So you are a busy person, and we have lots to talk about.
Good.
Oh, so thanks so much for tuning in. So let's start at the start, I guess, with your own writing career. So have you always been a writer?
I haven't really. I mean, I'm going to set myself apart from any other writers to say that early on I did some writing and I was inspired to write because my father was a writer. And my father wrote short stories primarily. He got some this was back in the 50s, and he got some stories published in some very prestigious magazines back when Collier's was still around and Cosmopolitan was publishing short fiction and was doing quite well there. And then he turned his attention to novel writing, and he just had he had like a short story mindset, not necessarily a novel mindset. And of course, the opportunities for writers to get novels into the world were quite different back then. And so that never really panned out for him. But it was always very clear to me that he would love it if I was a writer, and I loved writing. I did some, studied in creative writing classes in college and things like that. But really, for a long time, I think I was unconsciously just studying storytelling craft by reading books and watching movies and things like that. And it wasn't until 2011 that I had an idea that I decided was sort of the kernel of what could be a novel-length work. That was got published in 2013 as The Sons of Death. That was the first Anne Kinnear suspense novel. And yes, I've been writing ever since then, novel-length work, short stories, fiction and nonfiction, articles, as you mentioned. So yeah, my writing activity spiked in 2011.
And what did you learn from your dad about writing? That's an interesting kind of way to come to it.
Yeah, I don't think it was so much learning about writing as seeing being a writer, being an author as a legitimate and admirable goal to have. And so, unfortunately, my father passed away before my books came out, but I kind of feel like he's looking down and clapping his hands, because I know he would love what I was able to do, and he would really love indie publishing. So if only it had come around a couple of decades sooner.
And what drew you to the self-publishing route?
Well, when I was finishing The Sons of Death, and I belonged to a group called the Brandywine Valley Writers Group, which included both indie and traditionally published authors. And I was asking around about, I was asking the traditionally published authors I knew, what were the benefits? And I was like, oh, of course, they help you promote your book. And they were like, well, yeah, sort of. And I just wasn't hearing anything that made it sound appealing to me. And I was very intrigued. I mean, I think at the time, what was really driving me was the control. I think if you talk to indie authors, the ability to control your own intellectual property and creative output is one of the drivers, certainly. That was very appealing to me. And since then, I have fleshed out my thoughts about indie and traditional publishing. Not that traditional publishing is bad. And I always like to say that even the Alliance of Independent Authors, of which I'm the campaigns manager, is not against traditional publishing, but we are very much pro understanding what you're getting into, what you're likely to achieve and what you're not likely to achieve based on either path. But just being able to control my own creativity. Like I was working on the 6th Lizzie Ballard novel, and I had an idea for what I think will be a standalone book that was not in either Lizzie or Anne Kinnear's world. And if I were with a traditional publisher and I owed them Lizzie Ballard 6 on a certain date, I wouldn't have been able to pursue that. But I was able to sort of go where my creative energy was taking me at that moment. You know, as the CEO of my author business, I could just decide to postpone the publication of Lizzie Ballard 6 a little bit. Sorry about that, Lizzie fans. And go where my energy was. I'm never going to have a cover I hate. I'm never going to have, my rights tied up with a third party that maybe doesn't even take advantage of them. And I can take advantage of those things as I see fit. And I really think that one of the other biggest benefits of indie publishing that I see looking back is care of the backlist. So, with traditional publishing, you're going to have, if you're lucky, a big spike in attention and promotion and marketing and love during the time around your book launch. And then a couple of months later, and certainly a couple of years later, the traditional publishers moved on to the other books that they're focusing on that are launching. And I still promote my first in series books that came out in 2013 and 2017. More than any of my other books. And so that care of the backlist, I have a whole set of C's for indie publishing. Care of the backlist is another one. So it was the right choice for me at the time. And I look back and I'm still happy I made that choice.
And you started in 2013, you were saying. Is that when you kind of started writing or started to see this as like a viable career? So I'm curious if your choice to go to the indie route had to do with, because that would have been kind of when things started opening up or kicking off a little bit more. Do you have an interest in technology? Was that something that really kind of also drew you to it, which I guess goes hand in hand with the control aspect?
Yeah, I think part of it was one of the other C's is chronology, the other C's of indie publishing. And so one of the reasons, even back in 2013, that I chose indie publishing is that I would talk to traditionally published authors and they'd say, oh, I just got a deal, or I'm just working on my next book. Now it's 2013, it's going to be out in 2015 or whatever. And these are people who had contracts. Like these were not people who were then factoring in the process of finding an agent, finding a publishing house that was interested in them. And so that idea that I had this piece of work that I was very proud of, that I'd approached in a professional way, and now I'm going to head down a whole other path that might never pan out. And even if it does pan out in the best circumstances, this book isn't going to get into the hands of readers for, years probably. And so that wasn't appealing at all either. I wanted to start focusing on marketing and promoting that book, not trying to get it into the hands of gatekeepers. And the other thing that I like to tell people is that you can choose to traditionally publish, but you can only choose to try. I'm sorry, you can choose to indie publish, but you can only choose to try to traditionally publish. And so your story might never get into the hands of readers if you're relying on the traditional publishing mechanism to do that. And that quality is necessary, but not sufficient. There are hundreds, if not thousands of books queuing up, looking for a slot, a limited number of slots in the traditional publishers' offerings that they have. And the fact that you've written an excellent book, you have to write an excellent book, but having written an excellent book isn't a guarantee that you're going to get your book into the hands of readers via traditional publication.
Yeah, that's so true, unfortunately. But for authors that do choose to go the indie route for those reasons, what advice would you give somebody that's starting, say, new in 2025?
Well, one thing I would say, first of all, and this is very much in line with like the top level recommendation ALLi would give, is that if you want to make this a business as opposed to like a hobbyist. So if you're writing your family history and what you want to do is put it up on the retail platform so that your friends and family can have easy access to buying ebooks and print copies of it, then that's a perfectly legitimate goal. And the way you go about that is going to be different than if you're hoping to build a career and you're hoping to make it, a significant amount of money, perhaps your entire income based on that book. So if you're approaching it as a business, then you have to approach it in a business-like way, in a professional way. I'm going to sort of set aside the craft side because that could be a whole conversation unto itself. But early on, start familiarizing yourself with what the options out there are on the indie side. Start looking around start understanding what your comps for your book are. I think learning that early is something it was not even on my horizon at all, but understanding if somebody likes this kind of book, are they going to like my kind of book? And then becoming a student of things like the cover design that those books are using, the way they're promoting themselves online. I just think being a student of how to succeed in publishing is not only important, but it can be really fun. So just understand who you want your book to be appearing next to on retail platforms. Start thinking about, as a reader, when you're looking at you're perusing the let's say the online stores, and you see different price points. What does that mean to you as a reader of that genre? And start thinking about what that might mean for you in terms of how you want to price your books. So that would be my first piece of advice. Start becoming a student of the world that you want to be operating in.
I think that's a really good point, and something to keep in mind too for authors who are taking marketing advice from different people. Like maybe it might not work for your genre, so it's important to kind of keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, for sure. I found myself at one point in my career, I had sort of defaulted into a lot of communities with rapid release writers. And I'm not a rapid release writer. My books end up coming out about once a year, which for some people that might sound like rapid release, but I was in communities with people who were releasing books like every 3 months. And I started getting feeling uncomfortable about this. I'm like, oh, this is the route I have to take in order to be successful. And that was not the case at all. And so, yeah, I think what you're suggesting is find the communities you want to associate yourself with publicly, but also find the communities that you want to associate yourself with privately, so you're learning the right lessons and not learning lessons that aren't appropriate for your business.
Yes, exactly. And what are some other common pitfalls you see new authors fall into, and how would you recommend avoiding them?
Well, I guess a pitfall that maybe isn't as common as it used to be because of resources like what Kobo offers and ALLi offers is the idea of like, let's not publish our first draft. And I think that is what happened early on in the indie publishing space, is people are like, whoa, look, I can do this with a click of a few buttons. I'm going to go like dig my old the thing I wrote for my creative writing class in college, and I'm going to put it up on Amazon. And that just wasn't good. And so I think this caution is less important now to say, but it's probably, still a foundational thing to say, is that you need to wear your creative hat. And then at some point you have to take off your creative hat and you have to put on your editorial hat and you have to put on your marketing hat. And you have to say, for my publishing business, is this how I want to represent my publishing business and myself as a creative to the readers out there? And then when you have made it as good as you can, then you need to enlist professional help. I think that having a professional edit is one of those things that there are many ways you can economize, that be a frugal author, but I think skipping the editing portion is not one of the ways you should be doing that economizing. And that can be, going to, hiring a professional editor, but it can also include things like involving beta readers in your genre and things like that. And I guess the other piece of advice I'd say is sort of along the lines of become a student, is dip your toe in the waters of, like, put together your email list right away. Why not, right? Like, it might have 3 people on it, but that's fine. And even if you don't have a book out there, you could start experimenting. Like, let's say you have a book that's set in England in the 1800s, and you're doing tons of research on that. And so you find a group of people, it might be like your mom and your neighbor and your college roommate, and you say, look, I'm going to send you this note. I'm going to send you an email once a week with some fun fact that I found. And then over time, they'll mention to their neighbors and their moms and their college roommates that, somebody's sending out these interesting tidbits about life in 1800s England. And I think that can be a great way to ease into some of these marketing and promotion steps that you'll need to take once you're published in a way that's, again, comfortable and doesn't catch you flat-footed when now you have a book and you don't know what to do to get the word out about it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Just slow and steady to build it up at the beginning. And I really like that you're saying to kind of stay a student, because I feel like that's such a great attribute for somebody to have at any age, is just like wanting to learn about something and just the willingness to ask questions. Because this community is full of people that will answer the questions or probably have already asked them, you know?
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious on the other side of like an author starting out. How would indies measure their success? Like, and I know that this is maybe like a really hard question, but are there benchmarks that helped you at the beginning that, how can you measure success? Like, did you celebrate when you sold your 10th book, your first book in Canada, you made $100? Like, what would you say for an author starting out?
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish the celebrating the successes from the measuring the progress in a way. This is interesting because this is a somewhat sad story, but I just heard about a woman that I worked with many, many years ago. She had passed away. There was a Facebook group of, fellow alums of this company, and somebody had posted this information. And it made me remember that on the inside of my medicine cabinet, I have a printed out email that she sent me when I published my first book. It was only a couple of sentences long, but it was so nice. And she'd, just taken the time to send me to my work email address, and I printed that out and I hung it up. What will it have been? 12 years ago now that she sent me that, and that is still hanging up. So I think those things that you can celebrate, you've gone through the process, you've completed a book, you've gone through the work of getting it out there, or you've gone through the work of finding an agent, or whatever route you've taken. You've done this tremendous thing that everybody says that they want to do, and so few people actually do. I do think that understanding your goals and your circumstances are vital to being able to measure your progress. And so between 2013, when my first book came out, but even between 2011, when I first started working on it, and 2019, I was managing my writing and publishing work around a full-time job. And so what I could expect of myself was different than it was when I left my full-time job in 2019, and now I'm writing and publishing and podcasting full-time. And so I would have discouraged myself if I had applied the same metrics to my life before 2019 as I did after 2019. I think that, again, I'd use the example, if your goal is to get your family history into the hands of interested readers and your family and friends, then that's different than if you want to retire on it. I also think that factoring in just the reality of the situation. I mean, very, very few authors, either traditionally or indie published, are going to be able to actually make a living wage just on the basis of their books. And so almost every indie author who's doing this full time has a set of other streams of income that they're relying on. So for me, that's largely speaking engagements and writing articles for writer-focused magazines. So do I still have a goal of being able to just rely on my book writing to make a living wage? Yes, certainly, that would be super fun. But I'm also accommodating the current circumstances. So yeah, the question of how to set the goals is so difficult. And I think that probably, especially early on, the key is to set a goal that's attainable and it's small. Like, set a lot of attainable small goals rather than saying, okay, I'm getting ready to publish my first book and now I want to retire on the proceeds. Maybe your goal is I'm going to take a course on BookBub ads and I'm going to get really good at that. And so that's my goal, is to achieve profitability in my BookBub ads, within the next 3 months or something like that. And I think if you pick out those small, manageable goals, then you're much less likely to make yourself crazy.
And one other valuable resource for indies is the Alliance of Independent Authors, as you mentioned. So can you tell us a little bit more about that for any viewers who might not be familiar?
Yes. So I became a member of ALLi back in 2018. So the Alliance of Independent Authors is a nonprofit global organization, and its mission is ethics and excellence in self-publishing. And I became a member back in 2018, largely, I have to admit, because they have really good discounts on author services. And so I became a member, and I was very happy. The discounts I was getting, more than offset the money I was spending on my ALLi membership. And, time went on. And as time went on, I became more familiar with the other things that ALLi has to offer. It's a great supportive community of people who are and have access to experts in the worlds of writing and publishing. Just one example of the community is that a couple of years ago, we moved our community platform from Facebook because we wanted to walk the talk of not being reliant on third-party platforms in order to reach the people we wanted to stay in touch with. We created a platform called Self-Pub Connect, which I think is great because it keeps me out of the distraction of having Facebook notifications popping up while I'm trying to interact with my fellow members. And that is great because it is a private moderated group where people can go and ask questions about indie publishing, and they are tapping into not only the expertise of our ALLi team, but also of our advisors. We have a fantastic group of advisors. I know many people will know Mark Leslie Lefebvre. He just joined ALLi as the advisor for bookstores and libraries. Joanna Penn is one of our advisors. Mark Coker of Drafty Digital and Smashwords. Ricardo Fayed of Reedsy. Jane Friedman. I could go on. And so members have access to their expertise. We have live Q&A sessions once a month, usually with one of our advisors, where people can ask very specific questions they have about the advisor's area of expertise. The discounts continue to be a big draw for a lot of members. And I think a great way to sort of describe what ALLi does is to describe its four main campaigns. And it's the campaigns manager. I'm responsible for the campaigns. And they are indie publishing for all. So what are the resources, including education, that people need in order to self-publish effectively? There's Open Up to Indie Authors, which is ALLi pursues or engages in conversations with events organizers or award organizers or grant organizers and things like that are not yet open to indie authors, and tries to pave the way for our members to take advantage of those. Ethical self-publishing, especially over the last year, has been very focused on AI, the ethical use of AI for authors. And we have C's are very popular. We've sort of organized our recommendations around AI, or our stance on AI, based on clarity, how clear are the different platforms in how they're training their AI. Consent, ideally finding a way for AI developers to obtain consent from the people whose intellectual property they're using to educate their models. Compensation, we would love to receive some compensation for the fact that our work is being used in this way. And those are all on the AI developer side. And then curiosity. We recommend that our members bring a sense of curiosity to the use of AI, whether or not they decide to use it for themselves or not, whether they decide to use it maybe only for the business side of their work, but not for the creative side. I think a lot of people are making that decision. At least stay curious about what's going on, because I do think that people who are just shutting their eyes to it are putting themselves at a huge business disadvantage. And then the final campaign is publishing for profit. And we've recently engaged Joe Solari, who, among other things, is the force behind the Author Nation Conference, to help provide our members with advice about how do you do this in a profitable way. And so, for many, many reasons, I recommend everybody check out the Alliance of Independent Authors. It truly has been an ally, a true ally to the independent publisher.
Absolutely. I'm curious if anyone watching, could you drop in the chat if you're a member of ALLi, or if you're going to be? I would love to see. I enjoy the email newsletters and the kind of there's several podcasts as well. I think there's just such There's so many resources. And then you also have the you kind of like ALLi approved, because I know that that can be
Yes.
something that's very important, right? That it's hard to tell now, like what is legitimate and what isn't. There could be a company that are, I don't know, have pitched the rights for your book for translations or something, or could be any number of things. So it's always helpful to have a resource where you can actually see and like, oh, has anyone at ALLi worked with this company before, and what was the feedback? Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's really valuable.
Thank you for mentioning that, because one thing, I guess the other thing I'd add about people who are really at any stage of their career, not just beginners, is the importance of understanding where the bad players are. And ALLi offers two services to help people do that. One is that we have a partner directory. We have a directory of organizations and individuals who offer author services, and they've been vetted. And so if you're looking for an editor, if you're looking for a book coach, if you're looking for a cover designer, you can go to the partner guide and see who ALLi has done the legwork for you on. And the other one I'd like to recommend people check out is the ratings. And so if you go to selfpublishingadvice.org, so there are sort of two sister websites for ALLi, the Alliance independentauthors.org and selfpublishingadvice.org. And if you go to selfpublishingadvice.org/ratings, then you'll get our ratings of awards and services so that you can find the bad players. And I also always like to recommend, although this is not affiliated with ALLi, I always like to recommend Victoria Strauss's Writer Beware. That's a blog post that Victoria's done for, I don't know, like 25 years, where she's kind of unearthing, she's exposing the bad players. And I find that to be super useful. Not necessarily that, like an individual author, the chances that maybe they're considering work with that particular organization that Victoria is examining may be low, but you can start to get a sense of like, what are the tactics that people use? What are the red flags? What are the things people have to watch out for to make sure that they don't connect themselves with a bad player, because the stories are heartbreaking. You know, people who have spent tens of thousands of dollars because someone promised them they'd get on the bestseller list. And yeah, no one should be making that claim. No one can make that claim. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of great resources to help you find the good ones and avoid the bad ones.
Yeah, that's such an important resource, especially for authors who are just starting out and might not know better. It's so easy to be taken advantage of online.
Yeah.
So that's really important. We talked a little bit about AI, but what are some other ways that you feel like the indie publishing landscape has changed in recent years, and what do you see for the future?
Well, now I'm kind of taking off my ALLi hat and putting on my individual hat. But one thing that I'm really struggling with, and this is just, over the past, not even years, but maybe months, but I'm really seeing social media taking a much different role in author outreach. I think a lot of people are fed up. A lot of people are leaving social media platforms they've been on a long time. I mean, I'm talking about like the readers we're wanting to reach. I know for myself, I have really deprioritized my activities on social media, and my approach, especially for the Indie Author Podcast, where I do want to get word out about guest appearances and advice they're sharing and things like that to people who are already following me. I'm not spending very much time at all on those platforms, but I am posting, like I'll post announcements of new episodes or little, quotes or questions that people might have that would be answered. I'm posting them through a social media posting tool rather than going onto the individual platforms. I know that that's not, in the past, that wouldn't have been recommended. The recommendation was, well, you have to be there and interacting with them. But I actually do think that one thing that's becoming a more common piece of advice than when I started was just pick one or maybe two. Even if you plan on being active, just pick one or two. Don't try to be active everywhere. And I'm really more doubling down on going to places where I know readers are looking for books. And so I'm focusing much more this year on Amazon ads and BookBub ads rather than Facebook ads. I'm spending almost nothing on Facebook ads now. So I think now is a really good time for people to rethink how they want to be factoring social media, and if they want to be factoring social media into their marketing and promotion work, and looking for some alternatives. I mean, another alternative would be things like a Substack, where you can, again, connect directly with people without relying on a third party. I mean, you're relying on Substack, but you're creating that connection in a way that's less mediated by the platform. And as always, like, the email list is king. Like, that's what I was hearing in 2013, and that is something that has not changed. Owning the data of your most ardent fans and followers is represented by the people who are subscribing to your email newsletter. I think that's just something everybody should be doing right away.
And your website too, I guess. Like, it's so important to have something that's like up to date and functioning, that you own that space as well, given the changes in popularity of the different social platforms.
Yeah.
I do think it's good advice to like always just focus on one, and the one that you like doing, because I feel like people know when you're not as into it. Like, if it's really hard for you to condense a post into something that can be read on like Threads or X or anything, then maybe you should have a Substack instead, where it's like a bit more long form. Or if you're absolutely not comfortable with video, like, you probably shouldn't be on TikTok, because you don't really need to be.
Yeah, when I first became aware of TikTok, I spent like 35 seconds looking at it as a consumer, and I was like, I hate this so much. It is clear if I don't even like looking at it, I'm going to be awful at creating content for it. So I never even went there. But yeah, that is so true in so many ways. Like, almost anything that you are thinking of doing as an outreach platform, you should enjoy. Like, I enjoy getting my daily BookBub feature deal emails, and so I kind of understand the gestalt of that. And so it's made it more fun for me to pursue BookBub ads, different than BookBub feature deals, as an outreach. So yeah, that's also kind of fun advice. Like, do focus on the things that you enjoy doing, not the things you hate doing.
And even if oh, sorry, Laura, I'm cutting you off, but oh, I was going to say, even if you're like you were saying, using a social scheduler rather than going on, because that's better for your mental health. Like, I think that's okay. I think you can take those steps to sort of look after yourself as well, because it's very easy to open them and just get stuck and lose a few hours, and then all of a sudden you're like very depressed about the world, so look after yourself and what you're ingesting.
Absolutely, for sure. Like, you have to protect your business side, has to protect your creative side, because the creative side is the foundational thing that is making the rest of it possible. And also, as with all these other things, consider your goal. Like, at some point, my goal became not to interact with people on social media, but rather to provide information to the people who are already following me. Like, here's a new episode of the podcast. Oh, my book is on sale, or whatever. So my goals shifted, and so the strategy I was using to meet those goals shifted as well.
As an indie author, do you feel a lot of pressure? Like, you mentioned Substack, there's lots of things like Patreon, Kickstarter. Do you feel a lot of pressure to kind of jump in on those as well?
Yeah, I've just coincidentally had a whole bunch of conversations about Kickstarter over the last, 6 months. Russell Nolte, for example, is the ALLi advisor for crowdfunding. I've had maybe a couple of episodes on the Indie Author Podcast where we've been talking about it. And every time we get done, I'm like, it's kind of like TikTok. I'm like, oh no, not for me. Like, I totally hear and understand all the benefits of doing a Kickstarter, but the fact that I just get anxious, like, I got anxious just listening to the people talking about crowdfunding campaigns. And I thought, I'm already trying to do two jobs worth of, like, I just can't. It gets back to what you were saying, Tara, that you have to protect your mental health. So that's something that I keep thinking, oh, I should really do that. And then I think, no, I really shouldn't right now, like maybe down the road. Another one would be direct sales. I totally buy into the idea of the benefits of direct sales. I offer direct sales. I always encourage people to buy ebooks from my direct sales store before they go to the big box online retailers. But I don't necessarily push my print books, because I just really honestly don't feel like taking on the administrative work of sending out books. And so yeah, some of the things that everybody's talking up now, and I'm saying, yeah, someday, but not right now for me. But I actually am having a ton of fun experimenting with AI, and I do recommend that people play around with it, if not for. I'm not going to try to talk anybody out of saying they don't want to use it for their creative work. That is totally a personal decision, and I respect that. But um, I mean, as an example, as a way of engaging people more in the podcast episodes, one of the things I'll do is in Descript, which is the program that I use to edit the audio and video, and has a little AI component with it as well. I'll say, what are 5 questions that I could that would be answered by this interview, so that I'm not just saying, oh, this is an episode about writing contests, about how to improve your chances in a writing contest. These are the specific questions that this episode will answer. And I've gotten great engagement on that. And those are questions I would not have thought of myself. And so that's where I've been focusing my non-writing time energy lately.
Yeah, I think the curiosity is so important, especially with like how you can use it to. I almost think about it as like an assistant. A lot of authors would have virtual assistants, but you could,
Yes.
in theory, have an AI that's helping you with some of this like administrative stuff, or even like something to bounce ideas off of, like what's the best way to create this schedule for myself, or there's lots of things that it could do. So yeah, I think having a little bit of a curiosity around it is important.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been working this book I had said earlier was, just kind of popped onto my schedule. When in the Amazon KDP questions, where it gets to the point where it says, have you used AI in the production of this book, to support the production of this book? I can't remember what the wording is. For all my other books, it's been no. For this one, I'm definitely going to click yes, because what I found has been invaluable is, in the past, I would get to a point like, oh, I don't really know if it's better if this location that she's traveling to is far away or close. So I would just go into ChatGPT. I would type, I don't know if it would be better if it's far away or close. Some possible pros of it would be this. Some possible cons of this would be this. And I'll send it off. And sometimes the answers don't make any sense. But just the fact of interacting with it, it's like having somebody sitting next to your desk, and you could say, let me just like say out loud what I'm thinking, has made this so much like a ridiculously faster process for me. I am not a fast writer, but within like 10 days, I had 30,000 words of book, which is unheard of for me. And it was because I was never stuck. Like in the past, if I got to that point, I'd be like, oh, well, I'll think about that like for a day or two, and then I'll get back to it. I was never stuck. And so, a tiny fraction of what lands on the final pages is going to be influenced by AI, but the process was so enabling for me for that particular book.
Yeah, because writing can be such a like solo experience as well. What you're describing is what I often send to Laura, where I'll just ask a question and then keep typing the answer, and then be like, "I'm sorry, now you're just listening to my thoughts. Thank you for letting me." So I should just be sending that to AI. So Laura, you won't get them in the future. So we talked a little bit about some challenges. Is there any other sort of big challenges that you think are facing indies at the moment? Like I think what comes to mind always with Kobo is that we do consider trying to get somebody's reading time versus like all of the other distractions that we've talked about, so allowing people to have the space to read or want to engage with the reading. So that's always that's the problem we're trying to solve, and like keeping people reading when they do. Is that something as well that indies have to kind of consider, or is there a different challenge that you think is something that's more pressing for indies right now?
That's a great question. I mean, I'd actually be curious, unless you guys have talked about this really recently in the podcast, I'd be really curious to hear what you're advising, because the thing that popped into my mind, which is not, I have to say, something I'm personally doing, but I've seen other people doing, is making their work more engaging beyond the page. So having, I think that's where things like TikTok can come in, or maybe TikTok is a bad example, but interacting with people on in video like I'm going to be on a platform at this time answering questions, and like pulling the, let's say, the fictional world or your non-fictional world, whatever you're writing about, into other platforms, I think could be a possibility. But yeah, that's a fascinating question. Or do you guys have like immediate recommendations about that?
I think from our perspective, it's all about making the reading platforms like absolutely seamless, like making sure our e-readers are like the best out there. So the person, if they're using an e-reader or even the free apps, that it's such a good experience. Like we never want them to like, for something to be wrong, that they're stopping reading. And then part of that is also making sure our recommendations are sort of bringing them the next best book, like really trying to get the next book into the reader's hands. And I think from like thinking about it from an author perspective, it's really important to just make sure, I know maybe this is, I was going to say like a junior answer, but just making sure that your book is really out there to reach everyone. So that it's, accessible, that you're making the file as functional as possible. You're being thoughtful, including like alt text and images, and just making it an easy to navigate process. So there's nothing that's stopping a reader from continuing, which I think most people do now. There's some great tools in like creating the books, but yeah, I feel like that's how maybe indies can engage with that piece, and hopefully we're doing the heavy lifting of trying to keep people within our ecosystem when we are. So I know the color devices were a real big piece of this for us when we launched our color e-readers, because it's just it makes it so much more engaging with the covers and everything. So it's been fun to see people like doodle and do their responses, and doodle in color all over the books within their e-reader. So that's been fun.
Yeah, the thing that popped into my mind based on what you were saying is the idea of looking for the opportunities that aren't cold calling. And so specifically, I was thinking of cross promotion with other authors in your genre. And so I was involved over the last year in a cross promotion arranged by Pamela Fagan Hutchins, and she got, I guess, 13 thriller writers together, and the idea was it would run for a year, and each month each author would feature one of the other authors in their newsletters. And I think that idea of you're sort of the way is already paved, because the person who's going to be recommending your book is somebody that the reader trusts enough that they're subscribing to their email newsletter. And so they can kind of slide, just as you're saying, you make it effortless. You make the experience once you're within the book effortless. You similarly make it more frictionless if you're tapping into your community in order to reach those readers that are appropriate for you.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Like some of the most successful promotions that we've done are with authors who have gathered a similar group of authors, and we're able to do that. And especially with Kobo Plus, it's more of a like that's our non-exclusive subscription platform. It's more of a discoverability challenge. So it's always really helpful when we have like author focused things where we can really spotlight certain books. So I think that cross promo piece is great. Also, like that works for like newsletter swaps, and I guess it all helps build out your readership there.
Yeah, exactly.
Even like sharing within author groups too. If an author has like a Facebook group where they sometimes feature other readers, I think that's good as well. And I think also too, like similar to when we talked about finding an author that's in your genre, also if you're wide, finding another wide author and making sure you're promoting to wide readers versus people who are exclusive to Amazon, I think is important too.
Yeah, it is hard to win over people who are doing most of their reading on something like KU to something where they're buying a la carte.
Yeah. So switching topics slightly, we wanted to chat with you about your podcast, the Indie Author Podcast. So what motivated you to start the podcast, and what do you hope listeners gain from listening to your interviews?
Well, I had started the podcast back when I was first involved with the Brandywine Valley Writers Group, and there were folks in that organization who had particular areas of expertise. Like there was someone who was excellent at author readings. There was someone who was involved in kind of like a co-op small indie press. There was somebody who had a lot of experience in media outreach. And I thought, oh, I'd love to talk with these people about their areas of expertise. And as kind of like a thank you to them, I put those interviews up as podcast episodes, and there would be, sometimes months in between episodes, and sometimes there'd be like a little flurry of activity. And then when I went full time with my writing, publishing, and podcasting work in 2019, I went regularly every other week, and then in 2020, regularly every week. And the topic of the podcast is the writing craft and the publishing voyage, because I love the nautical metaphor. And I always joke that people can kind of tell what I'm struggling with based on who I'm interviewing, because I'm like, oh, I really don't know what to do with my email newsletter. I'm going to go talk to somebody about email newsletters. But, I've had the opportunity to tap into some of the biggest names in the indie publishing space, some of the biggest experts, including Tara and Mark Lefebvre. Many of those people that I mentioned earlier as ALLi advisors have also been guests on the podcast. And this was very interesting. I just spoke to someone who said, or I guess she had sent me an email, and she said, the reason I like the podcast is just two people talking. It's like listening to two people talking. It's not somebody like being in your face about things. So that's really my hope, that people can tune in, and it will be like the three of us, me and my guests and the listener, are sitting around the table and hearing hearing knowledgeable people talk about topics related to not just indie publishing, but really any kind of publishing, because I do think that even authors who are traditionally published or who are pursuing a traditional publishing deal kind of need to have that indie frame of mind. And so, we cover lots of different topics, and I hope in a comfortable and enjoyable environment.
Well, you've had over 280 episodes, or almost, I think I counted.
Yeah, 280.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah.
You named some people there, but is there any like interview highlight that jumps out? Not to ask you your favorite child or anything.
Well, I think that two of the people who are most, so Michael Laron, I think currently holds the world's record for the most podcast appearances, because Michael and I have worked together a lot. We've done workshops on indie publishing together. We worked together at ALLi. We co-authored a book called From Page to Platform: How to Succeed as an Author Speaker. We're working on another book about co-authoring nonfiction. And so Michael and I spend a lot of time together. And whenever I have a topic and I don't have a particular guest picked out, I'll call up Michael and say, Michael, do you want to come up, talk with me about year-end planning or whatever the topic might be? And it's very interesting, because actually Michael and I have very different business models for our writing and publishing work. So I like those, because we can each sort of present our own approach, and the listener gets a variety. Mark Lefebvre has been, I think he was on Landmark episode 100 and Landmark episode 200. So he comes back quite frequently.
You got to get him back for 300.
I do. I should schedule that now, so he's ready for Landmark episode 300. And Joanna Penn, I've had on a couple of times, most recently talking about her second edition of her writing nonfiction book. But I have to say that so there are lots and lots of people in the indie publishing world that I've loved speaking to, but it's also been super fun. I've been able to talk to a couple of my heroes in the writing space. So Ben Winters, for example. Ben Winters is the author of the Last Policeman. He has a series called The Last Policeman. It's kind of like it's like a pre-apocalyptic story, because the Earth is being approached by a meteor that's going to wipe out humanity, and this detective has decided he's going to solve a murder mystery. It's a fascinating series of books. I got to talk to him, which was super exciting. And one of my other favorite fiction associated episodes was with Doug Dorst, who wrote a book called S. And every time this comes up, I keep meaning to put a copy of that book next to my desk so I can pick it up. But he did this. It was a co-authored effort with J.J. Abrams. And it's almost more like, I can't even describe it. So it is possible to get the book S in ebook form. Why anyone would want to, I don't know, because if you buy the print book, it comes in a slipcase, and it's you pull the book out, and it has like a a library label on it, like the band on the spine. And then you open it up, and as you start paging through it, you see handwritten notes in the margins. And as you read, you realize that this is as if two people are writing back and forth to each other. Like one person made a note in a margin and put the book back, and then the next person takes it out, saw the note, and is responding to it. So there's the story of S. There's the story of I can't remember what the book is actually called, the slipcase book. There's the story that is represented by the marginalia. And then there's a third story that is the footnotes to the book, ostensibly from the translator of the book. It's so fascinating. There's a napkin in it that has a drawing of a map in it. I think actually this is a great sort of tie into what we were saying before, is you make the book beyond just the pages. You make it like associated with the rest of the world. And what is a more fun way of doing that than opening a book up and a postcard falls out and it has some writing on it that proves to be a key to a mystery the book is presenting you with. You can tell I was quite a fan of S. So S by Doug Dorst and J.J. Abrams, if anyone is looking for a super fun, immersive reading experience.
Nice. And I like the idea of using the podcast as like talking to people that you'd like to, because I know we certainly do that on the Kobo Writing Life podcast. Well, Laura's the primary co-host, but Laura, was there anyone that you were really like, yes, we have to talk to that person because I'm a big fan?
Oh God, there's been so many at this point. Vanessa and I talked to a romance author recently, Sierra Simone. And that was fun to talk to. Yeah, basically any romance author I'm always excited to talk to.
Do you, if an author wanted to start a podcast, do you have any quick advice for them? Do you think it's still a popular medium?
It is definitely a popular medium, and becoming more popular all the time, I believe, for two reasons. One is that you have a podcast like literally in the person's ear. So I think it's a more immediate and intimate way of reaching people, even than writing. And people love things that enable them to multitask. So, podcast popularity is exploding. As with any of these things we're talking about, I strongly recommend people think through what they're trying to gain through a podcast, because it is a ton of work, as you guys know. And I am mainly still driven by my opportunity to network with the people that I want to speak with, and it is paid me back in many great ways. I probably wouldn't have had opportunities to co-author books with Michael Arana and Mark Lefebvre if it hadn't been for my podcast interactions with them. But I also actually have a book called The Indie Author's Guide to Podcasting for Authors, and it walks readers through those, like from the most strategic considerations, like if you don't like listening to a podcast, you probably don't want to host one, to very, very specifics like best practices for interview techniques or being a guest and things like that. In fact, Mark and I are going to be coming out with a book later this year called the Podcast Guest Playbook that is specifically tips for being an excellent podcast guest. But yeah, just think through it and make sure that the time you're going to be investing in it is going to pay you back in the way you want it to pay you back.
Well, thanks so much for chatting with us, Matty. I feel like there's a lot of great advice here for new authors or even experienced ones.
It's always lovely to talk to you guys.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about where viewers can find you online and what you have coming up next?
Yeah, if they want to find out about my fiction work, they can go to mattydalrymple.com, and that's Matty with a Y, Matty. And if they want to find out about my nonfiction work, they can go to theindieauthor.com, and that's Indie with a Y, INDY. If they want to find out more about ALLi, they can find information at allianceindependentauthors.org and selfpublishingadvice.org. And in addition to the two nonfiction books I'm working on with Mark and Michael on co-authoring nonfiction and podcast guesting, and I'm working away on my pop-up novel, my pop-up standalone novel, and then we'll be getting back to my 6th Lucy Ballard thriller.
I thought you were meaning like an actual, like you were going to take advice from that book. You should do like a proper pop-up novel.
I should do that.
As we're signing off here, I'm just wondering, is there anything else that you'd like to share with aspiring indie authors or anyone that's interested in the indie publishing community?
Well, I guess that the last piece of advice I'd share is find trusted resources. Certainly, Kobo Writing Life and ALLi are two of those resources, but find trusted resources using the ALLi and other resources we mentioned before to find the reputable ones is great. And then just follow the advice they say. Like, I think one of the mistakes that I made early on is I was like, oh, I wonder if I need an ISBN for an ebook. I'm going to spend the rest of my life searching online for what everybody thinks. I'm like, no, you just pick somebody. Like for me at the time, it was Joanna Penn. I'm like, you know what? If Joanna Penn says I should have an ISBN, I'm going to get an ISBN, darn it. And so you save yourself a lot of heartache and time and effort and frustration if you find those respected resources like ALLi and rely on them for the information you need for your publishing work.
And I would add your podcast to that list as well. There's probably a lot of really valuable things there too. Oh, well, thanks so much for chatting, Matty, and thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're taking a little hiatus in April, but we're going to be back in May. So we'll chat to everyone then. So thanks so much and enjoy the rest of your day.